The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
I'm an American. I have rights.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. Live streaming here on Rumble, 10 a.m. It is Friday. Happy Friday. We have some movement in the trade talks with China. Apparently, we're not really sure. According to Donald Trump, we are. So we're going to look into that and a lot more. A judge in New Mexico was just arrested for harboring Trendaragua gang member. All right, let's get into the news for today, April 25th, 2025. We're going to start with just the news. Once a tariff critic, economist Steve Moore now backs Trump's policy, Buy America, Sell China. Economist Stephen Moore on Thursday admitted that he was once skeptical of President Donald Trump's tariffs, but now endorses tariff policies, especially when it weakens China. And he should be feeling this way. I mean, everybody should be feeling this way because China is our enemy. And whatever we do to weaken our adversary, that's a good thing. China is going by the program of Sun Tzu, and I don't know what we've been doing. We've been selling out to our adversary, which doesn't make much sense for people that know and are aware of geopolitics. Story goes on to say, or I should say, Stephen Moore goes on to say, but you know, he really is Trump, 2 moves on the chessboard ahead of everybody else. And right now I'm feeling pretty confident. Moore goes on to say that he still expects the stock market to fluctuate over the tariffs, but that is not as a big of concern for him as it used to be. The Economist also urged Trump to try to isolate China economically in order to weaken the powerful nation. Indeed, they're our adversary. They do that to us, so we should be responding in kind. He also commented that the Chinese stock market has been an even bigger mess than the U.S. over tariffs. We have more news coming in from Reuters. Trump says President Xi of China called him, lays out trade and other deal plans in a Time magazine interview. The story goes on to say U.S. President Donald Trump says his administration is talking with China to strike a tariff deal, and that Chinese President Xi Jinping called him, according to a Time magazine interview published on Friday. That's today. Beijing so far has disputed what the White House is saying. The story goes on to say China's foreign ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Trump's statement before Trump's latest comments were published. It had urged Washington to stop misleading the public on bilateral tariff negotiations. Are they lying? I mean, the Chinese communists lie, cheat, and steal and manipulate. Who knows? Is Trump telling the truth? Is he using an exaggeration or a lie as negotiating leverage? Perhaps. Hard to say. Reuters has another article, China exempts some goods from tariffs. Well, this is a surprise if they're not negotiating. Reuters says China has exempted some U.S. imports from its 125% tariffs and is asking firms to identify critical goods they need levy-free, according to businesses that have been notified, in the clearest sign yet of Beijing's concern about the trade war's fallout. As Stephen Moore said, China's stock market, and China has more to lose. China is a parasite that feeds on the U.S. consumer market. Story goes on to say in Reuters, Beijing's exemptions, which business groups hope would extend to dozens of industries, pushed the U.S. dollar up slightly and lifted equity markets in Hong Kong and Japan. As a quid pro quo move, it could provide a potential way to de-escalate tensions. So the Chinese communists are saying that they're not negotiating, but they're showing signs of let's not say negotiating, but they show signs of changing their overall stance. So this guy, Alfredo Montanar Helou, a senior advisor to the conference board's China Center, a think tank, also cautioned, it's clear that neither the U.S. nor China want to be the first in reaching out for a deal. So China doesn't want to show weakness. If you read Sun Tzu, The Art of War, you'd know you could get it easily into the mind of the strategies that China is using. And again, the story goes on to say that China is not commenting publicly. This is echoed in Zero Hedge. Who blinks first? China may exempt tariffs on U.S. ethane and other goods. Well, we just talked about this. So ethane is one of the things they import from the United States that they need for manufacturing. And so they're doing what they can, not to help the U.S. market, but to help them, China, the communist Chinese, the mainland Chinese, in weathering a trade war. So it's uncertain whether these latest moves are any sort of a reconciliation with the United States. More trade news from the post-millennial. Scott Bessent says trade agreement of understanding with South Korea may come next week. Goes on to say we had a very successful meeting with the Republic of South Korea today. Story goes on to say Thursday, Treasury Secretary Bessent said the trade agreement with South Korea may be moving faster than initially expected, and that agreement of understanding on trade may be agreed upon as soon as next week. Bessent told reporters in the Oval Office, we have had a very successful bilateral meeting with the Republic of South Korea today. We may be moving faster than I thought, and we'll be taking technical terms or talking technical terms as early as next week. All right, let's get into another war, not the trade war, but the war of lower court federal judges and in tandem teamed up with the vast array of Democratic, liberal, progressive money and their array of law firms that ideologically side with them, but also are getting paid. And they're the ones that are bringing all these lawsuits to hamstring the administration. Now, how could this happen? As I mentioned time and time again, the Supreme Court is the only judicial branch that can check the President of the United States. You can't, see, there's a certain amount of immunity, okay? So when you talk about criminal prosecution of the President of the United States, this has been clearly ruled that he's got immunity because he can't be, how could he govern if he's bogged down with criminal investigations and prosecutions, etc.? Well, this goes the same with civil suits. You can't sue the administration, the President of the United States, because you don't like what he's doing. He should be checked by A, these are the checks and balances, is not lower federal courts. It's A, the Supreme Court, or B, the Congress. So the Democrats don't have the power in Congress right now. So in the past, if you're not young, if you're older, you obviously know this, and you're a United States citizen. In the past, when the electorate votes in a party, especially because usually the voter will hedge their bets. They'll usually vote opposite, like they'll vote for a Republican as president, and then they'll vote for their representatives and senators as Democrats. That way there's a balance. Now, when the electorate is frustrated with obstruction and partisan games, really, maneuvering, they'll vote all for one party because, as you saw with the polling, the electorate was concerned with the country was going in the wrong direction. And this is after voting in Democrats several times. That means voting in Democrats not only into the White House, but also into the legislature. So when the Democrats had all the power, what did they do? They fucked up the country. So the Republicans are trying to right the ship, so to speak. And people voted in the Republicans to take control of the federal government to do this, to right the ship, to remedy all the wrongs that were created by the Biden administration, and even going further back to Obama, Clinton, etc. So what happens? So now the Democrats use a strategy, more of the same strategy of lawfare against the sitting president, which he should be exempt from. I'm not saying that he can't be challenged in the Supreme Court, but lower courts putting in, because they're not, they know they don't have the power to make a ruling. So what they do is they just levy an injunction or a stay or whatever to stop the president for what he's doing. And then they go, oh, if you violate this, you're violating the courts. You know, no, he's not. They don't have the power. All they do is the power is to put in a stay or delay what Trump is doing. But you know when it goes to the Supreme Court, they're going to overrule it. The lower court, they don't have all this going round and round over illegal immigrants or whether they should stay or have due process or whatever. Now they're saying that they only have 12 hours. In any case, let's go to the National Review article. California federal court nullifies Trump executive orders against sanctuary cities. Federal judge in Northern California has barred the Trump administration from withholding funds from cities and counties that follow sanctuary policies, which were targeted by executive orders the president issued at the start of his second term. In a 6-page order this morning, this is yesterday, Judge William Orrick Jr., an Obama appointee, to the district court in San Francisco, reasoned that in a relevant part, Trump Executive Order 14-159, protecting the American people against invasion, and 14-218, ending taxpayer subsidization of open borders, violate the Constitution's separation of powers. All right. I'm not saying that he's wrong here, because the thing with funding is it's a congressional thing. And that's the problem. And that's what bothers me right now, that the fact that a Republican legislature and executive isn't doing more legislatively. Instead of allowing Trump to do executive orders, why don't we pass these into law? It's the same thing in Trump's first term. Oh, we're going to get rid of Obamacare. Did they? No. I mean, they got rid of the illegal part, which was the mandate, but moving on, One American News, judge partially blocks Trump's efforts to defund public schools supporting DEI initiatives. A New Hampshire federal judge, I wonder if this judge is a Democrat, has blocked the Trump administration from cutting funding to U.S. public schools to maintain diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. I mean, this leads you to believe that his his defunding of DEI is the problem. No, that's not the problem. The problem is the president can't limit funding that's been appropriated by Congress. U.S. District Judge Landia McCafferty argued that the U.S. Education Department's effort to block federal funding for public schools that continue to promote DEI programs likely violates the First Amendment. The First Amendment, all right, presenting textbook viewpoint discrimination. Is that what she's referencing, the First Amendment? I don't think it's the First Amendment. The Education Department issued a directive to public schools nationwide this month, cautioning that the institutions found to unfairly be prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI initiatives, particularly those that favor individuals based on specific racial or gender criteria, would face the withdrawal of Title I funding. I think that's legitimate, but like I said, it's the Congress needs to act. I don't know what the Congress is doing. What are they, in recess again? They don't do anything. They haven't even reconciled the bill. I understand that representatives have to go home and speak with their constituents, but this is getting quite ridiculous. They don't do any work. No wonder the congressional approval rating is so low. You think Trump has a bad rating? I mean, it's more from AP. Judge halts parts of Trump overhaul of U.S. elections, including proof of citizenship requirement. This I don't agree with. A judge on Thursday blocked the Trump administration from immediately enacting certain changes to how federal elections are run, including adding proof of citizenship requirement to the federal voter registration form. I think federal voter registration form, not the state registration form. U.S. District Judge Colleen Collar-Connolly in Washington State, go figure, sided with voting rights groups and Democrats, saying that the Constitution gives the power to regulate federal elections to states and Congress, not to the president. She noted federal lawmakers are currently working on their own legislation to require proof of citizenship to vote. So this might be moot. Hopefully the Congress will work. The point is, as many pundits point out, the federal law already prohibits illegal aliens from voting. Yeah, but having a law with no enforcement is no law in my book. And there's no proof of citizenship, so how do you police a law? They're not policing the law. That's the problem. And it's a judge here, a judge stopping him here. See, the thing with the voter registration is, if you look at the Constitution, the federal government has a right to set down policy guidelines. This is a policy guideline. There already is a law, right, that prohibits non-citizens from voting. So he's just adding an enforcement mechanism. I don't think... I mean, the way to really get this through is through legislation, but I think if it goes all the way to the Supreme Court, regardless, they're going to vote that the president or the federal government, which Donald Trump is the head of now, has the right to tighten up the framework. Now, this is a breaking story, which is great. Great, I don't know, but certainly worth reporting on. Fox News is reporting ex-New Mexico judge, and he's ex only by a week or so, wife arrested for allegedly harboring illegal Trinidad member. He's an illegal alien. Former Dona Ana County Magistrate Judge Joel Cano and his wife Nancy Cano were taken into custody on Thursday. So, if you didn't know, last week he was fired because he broke the law. Certain law enforcement agents and judicial appointees, etc., have a higher bar. You can't have people involved in enforcing the law, or in the case of this judge, presiding over law enforcement, undermining the law with their own actions. So first he was dismissed, but now him and his wife face charges of evidence tampering amid allegations they harbored Christian Ortega Lopez, an alleged illegal alien who was also believed to be a member of Venezuela's notorious Trendaragua prison gang. And I always want to make that distinction that Trendaragua is a prison gang. They didn't exist outside the prison, and their only reason they're proliferating outside Aragua, which was the prison, is because Maduro let them out on the condition that they would go to the United States. And so there was some coordination between the Venezuelan government, the communist government there, and the prison members released, or actually prisoners, not just the gangs, released from prison, was go to the United States, or try to. So fighting back here, Trump directs the Justice Department to investigate Act Blue, Democrats' cash engine. The president ordered an inquiry into Act Blue, the main Democratic fundraising platform, in his latest move to use the government to target political opponents. And this is according to the New York Times. The reality here is the vast array network of funding monies see, the Democrats, what the Democrats do, or liberals do, is they increase federal spending. Then they skim on that federal spending to enrich their political coffers, which then they disseminate those funding mechanisms to like-minded law firms to commit lawfare and or support like-minded candidates and try to undermine the opposition party, which are Republicans. So the reason you're having all these lawsuits against the Trump administration is because things like Act Blue, then they receive funding for a variety of different people as payback or kickback, and then they disseminate those to other NGOs or other shell corporations, which then contribute to law firms or hire law firms, following me now, to then initiate these civil lawsuits against the Trump administration. Act Blue, which is used across the Democratic Party's ecosystem to collect donations online. The inquiry, it's really a conspiracy. The inquiry is ostensibly meant to look into possible illegal donations made by people in someone else's name, known as straw donations, as well as hard dollar contributions from foreign donors, which is illegal. During the Bill Clinton's years, they found out that a Chinese national was funding the Democratic Party. More news from the post-millennial. Trump DOJ joins lawsuit to defend Washington sheriff after state targets him for assisting ICE in apprehending illegal aliens. The Justice Department stands with Adams County against Washington state overreach, said Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Now here's the crux. Washington State Sheriff, who is being prosecuted by the state for assisting in U.S. immigration, Customs and Enforcement is apprehending criminal illegal immigrants, which is in defiance to the state's sanctuary statute. This comes after Adams County Sheriff Dale Wagner testified before Congress on the matter earlier this month. He is being sued by Washington State Democrat Attorney General Nick Brown. So it's not really a criminal charge because sanctuary city law, it's not really a law. Again, there's no enforcement. It's just like, It's like a proclamation. We're proclaiming that we're doing this. So there's no criminal case. So the closest thing they could do is sue him for not living up to the state's, because it's not really a law. It's, how would you describe it? Ordinance, a state guideline, I guess it was. So all, every municipal employee or county employee has to abide by state law. And it's, like I said, it's not really a law, so it's an ordinance or a proclamation or whatever it is. So the move is to get him removed through a civil suit. More news from Just the News. Michigan review of non-citizens on voter rolls skipped those without driver's licenses. The Michigan Secretary of State review of non-citizens on state voter rolls only included those with driver's license, excluding any who registered to vote without a driver's license or another form of identification, raising concerns about more non-citizens being on the voter rolls than previously disclosed. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, a Democrat, announced earlier this month that 15 non-citizens had voted in November election after her office conducted a review of state voter rolls. It's supposed to be none. So the Democrat says, well, let's put a number out there. Let's say it's 15. Maybe it was 150. Maybe it was 1,500. We don't know. But what we're saying here now is that they only included those, they only tracked those with driver's licenses. So when they went in the voter rolls. The point here being is that illegals, and the illegals know they shouldn't be voting. And as I mentioned earlier, is that there's no mechanism to keep them from voting. So the Democrats tell them, yeah, you can vote. And so a lot of times they don't discern whether or not it's a federal or state or municipal election. But they're being coached on to vote. And I had said this previously, anecdotally, was at in my municipality, was at the registrar of voters. And there were obviously foreign-born people that could barely speak English, were speaking broken English. And they were registering to vote. And all the guy said, he was obviously a Democrat, is said, you're a citizen, right? And who knows if the guy even understood him, was just like, yeah, nodded. But there's no proof of citizenship. So unless there's an investigation, we'll never know. Is it enough to change elections? Hard to say. It's not the point. The point is 0. How many illegal aliens should cross the border? 0. There is no acceptable amount. What's the acceptable amount of illegals of voting in federal elections? 0. It's like fraud is fraud. Oh, there's no election fraud. Oh, there's only as much election fraud. It's only a little bit. What is the point of voting fraudulently? It's to change the outcome of the election. It's why people commit fraud. Are there cases of accidentally doing something fraudulent? Maybe. But not going to register to vote and not going ahead and casting a vote. The reason is to affect the election. Zero Hedge is reporting the Netherlands to create low security detention centers and area bans for troublesome asylum seekers. What is this? So the Dutch are deciding that all of a sudden asylum seekers in this country, they would be illegal immigrants, They're not illegal there because they just let in whoever or whomever. That they're finding out that these people aren't assimilating and they're causing trouble. And like Erdogan said, the president of Turkey, well, at any time I can activate Turkish and other Muslims to become a political force or a force of chaos, terrorism, political terrorism, etc. It's happening all around the world. Now, most of the people coming into the United States illegally don't want to cause any problem because they're going to be found out and deported. But the thing is, in Europe, you could go burn the city down or burn down maybe a very historic Christian church, and then nothing happens. All right, the Federalist is reporting, switching gears here, that gun control doesn't stop shootings outside the United States. It won't here either. And it talks about this guy, John Lott, who is president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, has extensively studied the global phenomenon of mass violence, meaning mass shootings. Lott's research debunks the common misconception that America leads the world in mass shootings or school violence. It doesn't. There's violence everywhere. And I'm not going to drill down too much in this, but what he's saying is when people say that America is uniquely prone to this sort of thing, it's not true. So that's what they're disproving. But you know my stance on this. It's not guns. It's people that use guns. And the crisis isn't guns or the availability of guns. The crisis is people's frame of mind is being manipulated through pharmaceuticals and the internet. So whether it's social media or you have a handler on the internet or you're mind controlled and they're trigger words that are given to you over internets or over the phone or, God knows what. That guy, Cremo, that was just convicted in that July 4th parade shooting. I mean, the guy's a friggin' lunatic. And these people, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. should be looking into this as well. Is the fact that you have there's a mental health crisis, particularly on the left, but I mean, it's all over. People are crazy because they believe crazy people don't know they're crazy. You have to ask yourself, am I being rational? You got to ask yourself that every day. And when you're getting dressed, are you dyeing your hair blue? Is that a rational move? Or getting a face tattoo. I don't understand why I can't get employed. They're racist. Speaking of mental illness, PJ Media is reporting here that Trump 2028 hats appear in his online store and the left goes mad. That's what I mean. Is like if you've ever talked to a postmodernist or a leftist, a progressive, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Ever. If you watch The View, they're completely detached with reality because they're postmodernists, they're subjective thinking. I believe it's my truth. Your truth isn't the truth. Your truth is subjective or relative. So because Trump is trolling you, you're going to, piss in your pants or something. And the Democrats and progressives the Democrats themselves are being strategic because they want to be in power. But all their minions are stuff. The Democratic Party is getting them to piss their pants because they want the Democrats, progressives, liberals to have a visceral, emotional reaction to what's happening with everything, whether it's tariffs. I mean, even before Trump took office and we were talking about tariffs, people were going ballistic about tariffs. Oh my God, they're wetting their pants. It's a tool that the American government can use, right, in trade negotiations because we hold the cards. We have the biggest consumer market. And when you're talking about trade, you're talking about producing and selling goods and merchandise. Well, who's going to buy it? All right, and this is disturbing for me. All right, we got Trump announces he's going to meet with Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg for an interview. I am doing this interview out of curiosity, Trump says, and as competition with myself. What the fuck? Just to see if it's possible for the Atlantic to be truthful. Are they capable of writing a fair story on Trump? What the fuck is he talking about? In a competition with myself. That's a stupid way to word it. It sounds like you have a DID diagnosis or dissociative identity disorder. Why would you have a competition with yourself? He just means to challenge himself to see if he could, and he does this often, sit down with the enemy and try to turn it around on them. He has that much confidence in himself, I think is what he means. All right, the post-millennial goes on to say that Trump says, later today I'll be meeting with, of all people, Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor of The Atlantic, the person responsible for many fictional stories about me, including the made-up hoax on Suckers and Losers and Signalgate, something he was somewhat more successful with. Jeffrey is bringing with him Michael Shearer and Ashley Parker, not exactly pro-Trump writers either. To put it mildly, the story they are writing, they have told my representatives, will be entitled the most consequential president of the century. And of course, this was to appeal to Trump's ego. Whether they entitled the story that or that's never, you never go into a store, you never go to write a story as a journalist with a headline already written. You just use that to appeal to Trump's ego. And there you go. I'm doing this interview out of curiosity. The way I look at it, what can be so bad? I won. I don't know. Jeffrey Goldberg is a spy, right? He was involved in a Signal chat where they were discussing critical information, maybe not classified. And instead of bowing out or just quietly saying, hey guys, I didn't know you knew I'm in this chat, instead of revealing it to them directly, he immediately published. So he's a spy. He did exactly what Assange did, in my opinion. Post-millennial is reporting TPUSA, that's Turning Point. Student allegedly punched, spat on at Westchester University. I had a Chloe Cole event. I don't even know who she is. Pray for TPS USA students, reach out to them and encourage them. Okay, let's go to the story though. The attacker was arrested and taken into police custody. His name was not released. So this is my problem with the left. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this is what the Democratic Party wants them to do. Act emotionally, act on your emotions, act viscerally, and do shit like that. You want to intimidate people from joining the Republicans. You want to outwardly speak on, demonize Donald Trump and say he's so evil, you'd never want to talk. You know, they won't watch him on TV. They'll never listen to anything he has to say because he's bad. And then they go out there and physically attack people. This is political violence. Because TPUSA is a political organization. So you're attacking people hate crime, really, based on their politics. It's political violence. And they constantly say that the conservatives are involved in political violence. Never. It's the emotional left who can't control themselves, and they get so incensed that they have to do something. He couldn't have just went up and debate the guy, right? And that's what this country was founded on. That's why we have the different chambers and we have two sides of the aisle to debate whether or not the government should spend money. Just the News is reporting McCabe memos show how disgraced FBI leader kept Trump-Russia collusion hoax alive in 2017. The 8 memos penned by McCabe, most of them had never been released until earlier this month, span his discussions and meetings, including with President Donald Trump, held from January 24th, 2017 to May 2021, 2017, a critical time period ranging from just before the FBI sprung into an interview with retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn to just after Robert Mueller was appointed special counsel. And Robert Mueller was he seemed brain dead too. I don't know what that whole thing was about. McCabe was a stalwart ally of since fired FBI Director James Comey, coordinated closely with since fired FBI Special Counsel Peter Strzok on the launch and conduct of a flawed politicized Crossfire Hurricane investigation, relied heavily upon disgraced FBI lawyer Lisa Page as his close confidant. It's a conspiracy to undermine the President of the United States. It's fucking treason. I don't know why people have such a hard time with that at all. McCabe and Comey had pushed in December 2016 to include British ex-spy Christopher Steele's debunked dossier in the body of 2017 intelligence community assessment on alleged Russia meddling, but they were thwarted by the NSA and the CIA. The dossier was eventually included in an annex of the assessment. Why were they thwarted by the NSA and the CIA? Because those guys said it's fucking bullshit. In other words, the PP dossier was known. I had this crazy fucking liberal that I worked with at the news organization I was at that kept laughing and saying, PP tape, PP tape, PP tape, because he hated Trump. And it's like, what are you even talking about? And this is a guy that worked in the news industry. There's no corroborating evidence that this shit existed. And knowing Trump, that it's not that he doesn't like sex, but there's no evidence that he ever hired prostitutes. And it's really unlikely, considering he's a germaphobe, that he would have prostitutes urinate on him. In any case, the memos from McCabe pretty much outline what happened. Which was a conspiracy, and it was treasonous. More from Fox News. Sunshine State Dem announces switch to no affiliation. Democratic Party in Florida is dead. Florida State Senator Jason Pizzo, who had been serving as the state Senate Democratic leader, announced that he is switching party to no affiliation. During a speech on Thursday, Pizzo declared that the political party system here in Florida is nearly dead, and he asserted that the Democratic Party in Florida is dead and that there are no good people that can resuscitate it. Oh, he said they are good people that could resuscitate it, but they don't want it to be me. There have been people fleeing the Democratic Party for years now, since 2014. Just the News is reporting Georgia Democrats urged Stacey Abrams not to run for governor after 2 failed attempts. She's run twice, and that's enough to convince me she won't win. Jimmy Johnson, former chairman of the Appalachian County Democratic Committee, told the Atlantic Journal-Constitution. The warnings appear preemptive, considering Abrams has given no indication she has plans to run. Before I get on to this next article, I just have to say about Stacey Abrams and Georgia, is Georgia has put in place now the things they should have put in place after the 2020 election to thwart the elections of Raphael Warnock and that other Democrat senator. They were cheating in Georgia. So the Georgia has put into place now efforts to make election integrity strong. So she wouldn't win because it's unlikely that the Democrats have, because originally when she tried to win, or she said she would win, and she thought that she would win because they thought, and just like Trump, Kemp had more votes to overcome the fraud. So if you saw a redo of a Republican versus Stacey Abrams, you'd see an even bigger margin. But I do think that she wants to run because some of her environmental money she got out of the EPA was for a war chest. All right. Alex Soros. Alex Soros has been trashed as difficult, wrong person to lead mega donor foundation New York Magazine profile. George Soros passed the leadership torch to his son Alex, who is now the chair of the board of directors of Open Society Foundations. The real story is that every single person who knows the family knows that Alex was exactly the wrong person to lead the foundation, said New York Magazine. George Soros stated that the Open Society Foundation website calls his philanthropic network in the mid-1980s. It eventually became OSF, which has been led by George Soros for decades. In June 2023, he passed the leadership torch to his son, Alex. He is a babbling moron. And it's like the sons and daughters of brilliant people usually aren't that brilliant. I'm not saying that works for everybody. But apparently everybody knows that Alex Soros is no George Soros. And that if you know anything about the Open Society Foundation, it is basically an NGO that uses its great wealth to open up closed societies for infiltration. An infiltration for corporate takeover. In a variety, they use a cultural veil, and it's seen as cultural, but it's really for corporate interest. Biden area disinformation czar Nina Jankowicz urges European Union to resist Trump administration. This is from the National Review. If you know anything about Nina Jankowicz, she is a addled authoritarian. And of course, she's probably welcomed with open arms in the censorship-prone authoritarian European Union, where she's probably heralded as a hero. The point is, they wanted to institute what they have in Europe here. That should never be. The freedoms of the individual to speak or do what you want, as long as you're not breaking the law. And I mean the law, constitutional law, not people say there's a sickness out there, so you can't do what the Constitution says you could do. And in the Constitution, it says, well, you can't have freedom of speech now because there's a pandemic, or that you can't do XYZ because there's a pandemic, or we can institute fraudulent or fraud-prone procedures into the voting system so we can elect anybody but Donald Trump. All right, who's the Brazilian Donald Trump? It's Jair Bolsonaro. The LA Times is reporting Brazil former President Bolsonaro's health has worsened. Doctors say former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro's health condition has worsened following a bowel surgery nearly 2 weeks ago, as doctors say. Yeah, if you go to the hospital and you're not liked by the establishment, you're dead. So he experienced a clinical decline, elevated blood pressure, and worsening liver lab results. He's in Brazil. The establishment is going to make sure he dies. You know, if Trump, well, now that he's president, it's different. But if Trump as a candidate, you know, had to go into the hospital, all of it, you know what would happen. After a routine surgery, he developed a very strange and persistent infection, and now he's dead. I'm still putting out my warning to Donald Trump. If you're going to go to the funeral of the Pope, you better be, because the armed forces are one of the ones that decide, the Pentagon decides on your security along with Secret Service. The point being is that with all that's going on in the Pentagon and talks of the coup, and if you didn't see recently, James O'Keefe's outfit used another honeypot operation to uncover another anti-Trumper in the Pentagon. Or, you know, the Pentagon is corporate captured. So a liaison from a private institution, a liaison that meets with generals to discuss how they can get rid of Trump. All they have to do is turn their back like they did in Butler for a second. Whoopsie. Reuters. Trump poised to offer Saudi Arabia over $1 billion of arm packages. We know that's to fight the Houthis. I mean, it doesn't, and a hedge against Iran. It's a signal to Iran. Reuters also, Congo and Rwanda to sign accord in U.S. on peace pathway, sources say, amid talks of mineral deals. So we're trying to get a peace deal between these two warring countries because they have rare earth minerals. So, and this also has to do with China and trying to get them to sign on with the U.S. instead of China, so we can secure our own rare earth minerals, because most of the rare earth minerals we get through China, who actually mines them in different places in the world. And for the most part, we were like, why should we mine it? We'll just buy it from China. The agreement raises hopes that the latest cycle of violence and decades-long conflicts rooted in the Rwanda genocide might ease, with both countries hoping to attract significant U.S. investment in minerals. And if you know the thing about the Rwandan genocide, it was driven by tribalism, which is the same thing that's going on in the U.S. I mean, it's actual tribes, it's political parties, but it's this. They use the same psychology in tribalism. And actually, the way the media influenced the genocide, it was actually radio that influenced the genocide at the time. They learned a lot about what happened there, and they allowed the genocide to happen by holding the UN back. If you knew anything that was going on there, you'd understand. Washington also wants greater access to minerals that are currently being exploited predominantly by China and its mining companies. New York Post is an interesting article. Long Island hospital chair fired just hours after revealing thieves stole FBI probe docs from his home in growing scandal. Hochul wants my head. And I'm just going to go through it really briefly. Is that NASA University Medical Center Chairman Matthew Bruderman's home was broken into, and documents that were wanted by the FBI, an investigation going on by Kash Patel's FBI into corruption in New York State government. Really? Where millions of dollars were siphoned from the NASA University Medical Center. And the guy, Nassau County executive, aligned with this guy, Brudeman, who was fired, that said over $1 billion was bilked from the state since 2006 from the medical center. And so paperwork, documents that were wanted by the FBI for this investigation were then stolen. Apparently they were recovered, but all the corruption points to New York State government. All right, Reuters, FDA delays Novavax COVID vaccine approval, but Reuters said that it's looking like it's going to be approved, even though it includes attenuated virus, which is more traditional. It still includes mRNA. And big breaking news today, Russian general killed in Moscow area car bombing. The problem with this, obviously, is that, he was killed by the Ukrainians. This is the CIA does this shit. When do the Ukrainian spy network ever blow people up? Never. The perpetrator of the blast is unclear. I'll tell you it is, the CIA. Was it planted by a Ukrainian? Probably. But all the intelligence was Western-based. Financial Times, U.S. to loosen rules on self-driving vehicles, criticized by Elon Musk. Again, autonomous vehicles are reigning. And the New York Times says, if AI systems could become conscious, should they have rights? And Kevin Roos says, one of my deeply held values at tech columnist is humanism. I believe in humans. Humanism means that you believe there's no one above humans. And that's why when you say Christian humanism, that means Christ was the best human and that there's still a God above that. But secular humanism is what he's talking about, means there's no higher power other than humans. And then humans create technology. And he says the idea that AI models might soon become conscious and deserve some kind of moral status, the humanist in me thought, what the hell? Of course. What the hell, I say. All right, thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast, click that notification bell. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. I will see you next week. Have a great weekend. Happy Friday. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, live at 10 a.m. I'll see you. Respect.